What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Thursday, so you know what time it is. Time for another player breakdown. In this one, we're breaking down Kareem Hunt, Myles Gaskin, and Chase Edmonds and deciding what order we would be drafting them in. I'll only be going over these three running backs, so if you want my take on every other back, along with projections, values, sleepers, targets, voids, and a whole lot more, you can check all of that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So with that, let's get things started off as usual with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was what wide receiver scored the most full PPR points in a playoff game last season. Of course, actual playoffs, not the fantasy playoffs. The answer is Juju against the Browns. He had 13 for 157 yards and a score on 19 targets, which is 34.7 fantasy points. Ren Reginaldo was the first to get that on YouTube, and at Hoddard was the first to get that right on Twitter. Today's stat: 7 players had at least 3 rushing touchdowns in a game last season, but only one was a quarterback. Who was it? All right, so let's start this breakdown off with Kareem Hunt. Now, Hunt is currently going off the board, running back 26, the middle of the 6th round on average. Since joining the Browns in 2019, he has played in 24 games, averaged 11.8 fantasy points per game. Last season was able to average 12.5 fantasy points per game, finishing as running back 10 overall, but only 19th in points per game. He was higher overall because he didn't miss any time, but on average, he was not the running back 10. He was like a low-end running back 2. My take last season was that Hunt was close to a lock to return value if Chubb stayed healthy, and would be a running back 1 if Chubb got hurt. And that is close to what happened. He obviously exceeded value on the season, but he was more of like a low end 2 when Chubb got hurt last season. Of course, Chubb goes down pretty early in week 4 and then misses weeks 5 through 8. Over that time, Hunt averaged 15.2 carries, 2 receptions, but only 13.7 fantasy points per game. To be fair, one of the 2 duds that he had during that time frame did come in their game in Pittsburgh, where the Browns just got destroyed 38-7. So, I mean, you shouldn't expect any running back to perform well when the team loses 38-7. Excluding that one game, he scored 19.1, 16.8, 17.7, and 8.3 fantasy points. The real reason that we were disappointed, though, was the receptions, right? When we were looking at this over the offseason, we expected basically exactly what he was doing when Chubb was there. He's going to get a few carries, but he'll have games where he's really low. He'll have a few games where he's high. Maybe they're winning by a lot in those games. They're running a lot of plays, and he's spiking because of that. But then he's also mixing in for a few receptions. But we thought that when Chubb went down, that Hunt would get a lot more carries, and he definitely improved in that area. He got the 15.2. I mean, let's be honest, we shouldn't expect too many more than that. But we thought the targets would spike. We thought he might be up at like 6-7 targets a game, pulling in a ton of receptions, and that was going to be the reason he was a running back 1. But the targets basically stayed the same, and so we need to rethink his ceiling without Chubb. It's still fantastic, but it's probably not as high as we thought. We thought he had the potential to be a top 5 running back. That does not seem likely at this point. All in all, though, we know what Hunt is, right? He's never missed a game due to injury. He's averaged 14.9 fantasy points per game in his career. He's never had a season below 10.4 fantasy points per game. And we know he's going to provide low-end flex value while Chubb is active. And he has the upside to be a really, really nice running back 2 for you if Chubb got hurt. He should probably be the first backup running back off boards in drafts because no other running back, no other backup running back has as high of a floor as him, is someone you could realistically start in the flex. However, I do view him as slightly worse of a pick than he was last year because of what we went over. The ceiling is not as high as we thought, so I do have him a few spots back from where I had him last year, and I actually have him ranked exactly where he's going, at least as of right now. Maybe when you guys watch the video, I do another update, but as of right now, and very likely, he's going to be in that like running back 25 to 27 range. So right where he's going in the mid-6th round. I think that's like a quality pick. Probably don't want to touch him in the 5th round because we talk about the 5th round having a very high opportunity cost, But in the 6th round, if you need a running back and you want to capture some upside while also having an okay floor, I think that Kareem Hunt is a quality pick. Next up, we have Myles Gaskin. He was a late 7th round pick in 2019, only handling 43 touches in his rookie season, gaining a pretty low 4.3 yards per touch, but then he exploded last season, finished as a running back 10 in points per game, thanks to an 87.2% catch rate and 4.1 receptions per game. Really, really nice numbers there. Those receptions are the reason he was able to finish so high in points per game. He only had 2 games all season below 11.2 fantasy points and was close to a feature back. I don't want to call him a feature back, but he was definitely close. There was a lot of games where he's in the like 70% snap range. And I mean, not that many running backs have a higher snap rate, had a higher share of their team's touches in the backfield than Gaskin had. So if we could expect that level of production again, I mean, he'd be what, like a early 3rd round pick? That's probably where he'd be going. However, and of course, he's not going that early, so everyone have concerns. First, he wasn't amazing as a goal line back. He only had 3 scores on 9 carries inside the 5-yard line and did not have a single other touchdown from inside the 10 or inside the 20. And it wasn't because they weren't using him. He ranked 15th in red zone carries, 13th in carries inside the 10. Now, I do think a lot of that was being unlucky. I don't think he's like some horrendous goal line back or anything that they're looking at this and being like, can't give him a single carry now because he was awful. No, I just think he got a little bit unlucky. He's probably not all that good. And I think that them bringing in Malcolm Brown says something because Malcolm Brown has been incredibly efficient as a goal line back. So given that we've already seen this team show a willingness to bring in another back, when we had, Jordan Howard last season, he did come in, wouldn't be in at all during drives, and then would come in and convert goal line carries. Could we see something like that with Malcolm Brown because Gaskin wasn't that great in that area last season? Yes. I do not think that it's a lock to happen. I think absolutely Malcolm Brown could just purely be depth. He could take over what Salvin Ahmed was doing. He could just be a piece where they just wanted another running back to compete, but that he's not necessarily going to take goal line. However, if I had to guess, I would say that they brought him in to use in a decent amount of goal line opportunities. Maybe it's not like Jordan Howard last season where it was like every single time he comes in and converts the goal line carry, and that would just crush the value of Gaskin. But I think that there's absolutely a chance that he takes some of that. And so we need to consider that when talking about him. So that's a real concern. Another concern I have is that Gaskin was great in fantasy, but I mean, the Dolphins don't care about fantasy, right? They care about actual production. And realistically, Gaskin only averaged 4.1 yards per carry. He never gained more than 91 rushing yards, despite 4 games with at least 18 carries. So given that he wasn't all that efficient last season, and that they aren't, very invested in him, they only used a late 7th round pick on him 2 years ago, there is a chance that he sees a dip in volume as they don't feature him this season. And since the volume is what made him viable last season, because again, he wasn't overly efficient, he wasn't just scoring a bunch of touchdowns, he wasn't like that amazing besides the volume, you're taking a big risk and you're asking the Dolphins to continue giving him a ton of carries because he needs a ton of carries to be viable in fantasy. But they were vocal about wanting to find a featured running back this offseason, and while they didn't get one, they wanted to draft Javonte Williams before Denver jumps up ahead of him. They were looking at other running backs in free agency before just deciding to get Malcolm Brown for now, but could they trade for Melvin Gordon? Could they, be a team that adds a surprise cut? Maybe this summer there's someone that we think is going to make a roster, but surprise gets cut. Maybe they add them. I just think there are still opportunities, or I guess they could trade for someone who's not Melvin Gordon, but that seems like the most likely. There are just other opportunities to where there are just situations where Gaskin's value could just tank. So my take on him is that he becomes a stronger and a stronger pick every single week that they don't do anything. So for every week that they don't trade for anyone, they don't add anyone off free agency, he's a better and better pick. And if we get into mid and late August and this backfield is exactly the same as it is right now, then Gaskin should absolutely be ranked ahead of Kareem Hunt and Chase Edmonds. Okay, so if you're watching this video in late August, and that's the case, they have not made a change to this backfield, Gaskin wins. We don't even need to go over Chase Edmonds. He is absolutely the best out of these guys, and he is definitely worth his current ADP where we are right now, which is like the late 5th round. But I'm concerned that that's not going to happen, and so if you're drafting right now, which is what I have to assume when I make these videos, you're taking a very big risk in that late 5th round because the opportunity cost, like I've said, in the 5th round is so high. There are still other players that we are extremely sure what their role is going to be. And so if you're taking someone where you're not 100% sure, it's a risk, even though, of course, the risk could pay off. You take a risk and you open up some upside. Gaskin has a ton of upside. He just finished 10th in points per game. He could be running back 1 easily on this team if he's featured. I'm just concerned about the talk this offseason about trying to find another back, about him not actually being that great, them not being invested in him. I think there's a high chance that they still make a move and that crushes his value, and that would really hurt you entering the season already, losing out on your 5th round pick. So for me, again, it's just going to go up. Every single week he's going to get a better and better grade in my rankings. I mean, it's not going to be like weekly where I continue moving him up. There's only so high he can go. But as we move into August, he's going to climb in the rankings if they don't make a move. Next up, got to go over Chase Edmonds. Edmonds was a late 4th round pick in 2018. Didn't do all that much over his first 2 seasons. Averaged 76 touches per year. Scored 7 touchdowns over the 2 years. Then his role did expand last season. He handled 97 carries, commanded 67 targets, and scored 5 touchdowns on his way to the running back 27 finish, but was 35th in points per game because, again, he didn't miss a lot of time with injury. Edmonds is a little bit different than the other 2 running backs on this list because he has the potential to see that role change without an injury. With Hunt, there aren't going to be any surprises. We know he's obviously the backup. Chubb is obviously better than Kareem Hunt, and we know that Hunt is going to be like a low-end flex option while Chubb is healthy and will increase in value if Chubb goes down. With Gaskin, we know right now he's the starter. There are real concerns that he could lose his job, but he's the starter right now, and he can have a very, very big impact if that remains the case. But with Chase, he's the only person that, if we look at what they did last season, he's expanding on that role for sure. Again, Gaskin can only go up so much, and Hunt, we know what his role is going to be. But Kenyon Drake is now on the Raiders, and he leaves behind 239 carries and 31 targets. To fill that gap, the Cardinals went out and they did sign James Conner, 1 year, $1.75 million. I went over in, I believe, yesterday's video why that should concern you. If you like James Conner, that's basically as little as you can pay a running back. Indicates there was pretty much no market for James Conner, and so they could pay him whatever they wanted. But even if Conner's not going to have a large role, everyone knows that Conner is likely to be the goal line back. He's more likely to get short yardage and goal line work. The thing is, people use that as a huge negative for Chase. The problem with saying that is Chase isn't losing that role because he never had it. It's one thing to say that's a negative for Gaskin because he had that role, and so taking it away from him is going to reduce his value. But Chase never had the role to begin with, so he's not losing that value. He only has 1 career goal line carry, so Conner stepping in is not taking anything away from him. So Conner can take all of the goal line carries, and Chase could still be more valuable and would still be more valuable than he was last season because of all these touches that are left over. With 100% confidence that Conner is not taking all of the touches that Drake had last season. Think of it like this. First, Edmonds has 12 touchdowns over his 3-year career, even with the 1 goal line carry. So yes, it limits his upside, but you don't necessarily need goal line carries to score touchdowns. He scored 12 times, and none of them came on a goal line carry. But also, let's say that he doesn't get any this season. If you remove Kenyon Drake's 21 carries inside the 5-yard line, and then you give all of those to James Conner, and you give Edmonds 70% of the remaining volume, so none of the goal line carries. That gives Edmonds a total of 250 carries, 89 targets, which would on average result in a stat line of 250 carries, 1,100 yards, 68 receptions for 490 yards, and even giving him 0 touchdowns. We'll strip all of his touchdowns from last season. We give him none of Drake's work. We give him 0 touchdowns on the season. He'd still be a running back 1. Now, you can argue that 70% is too high, but I mean, I may agree with that, but I would also argue that, he's probably not going to score 0 touchdowns, even if we give him no goal line carries. He's going to get a ton of targets in the red zone. He's still going to get red zone carries. He's going to score, right? You don't need the carries inside the 5. He's going to score. But let's revise this. Let's only give him half of Drake's non-goal line work. We will still give Chase Edmonds 0 carries inside the 5-yard line and only half of the remaining touches from Drake. Now, this is going on the other end. This is probably unlikely to happen on the low end. Still has 206 carries for 906 yards, 63 receptions for another 450 yards. That's low-end running back 2 production on 0 total touchdowns. But he's up to, again, running back 1 production if we give him 5 or 6, which isn't crazy. I mean, he's been doing that on his limited touches the last 2 seasons. Why would more touches result in 0 touchdowns or fewer touchdowns than he's been getting? So no matter how you look at it, Chase he's going to get more work. Now, we don't know exactly how much more. There's a lot of ambiguity here, and we have not heard very much. But we can be pretty certain that Connor isn't getting 100% of Drake's touches, and that even if Connor takes all 21 of Drake's carries inside the 5-yard line, Chase Edmonds could still be a running back 1. That's still in his range of outcomes with a healthy James Conner, which is something that's literally never happened, right? James Conner does not stay healthy, and so think about that upside. Think about the upside if James Conner goes down, and now Chase does, for the first time in his career, get goal line work to go along with a ton of targets and early down work. That upside is massive. Also, for the people who say, well, maybe you don't want either of them because Kyler Murray takes all the goal line carries, that's just like a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, like, Kenyon Drake was 3rd in goal line carries among all players last season. So even with Kyler Murray taking a ton of carries, it's just they score a lot. They have a lot of plays near the goal line. So even if Kyler's taking some, there are still plenty to go to the running backs. Again, Drake was 3rd among all players. He had a higher share of his team's carries inside the 5-yard line than Derrick Henry. So unless you want to say that you can't take Derrick Henry because Tannehill's taking all the rushing touchdowns, don't say it with Kyler Murray, okay? So that's a breakdown of all 3 of the running backs. How would I rank them? As I said during the breakdown, if Gaskin is still the lead back come mid to late August, he is number 1 among these 3, and he probably jumps over a few people that are currently ranked and currently going ahead of these 3. I'm just having trouble buying into that and justifying the risk that does not happen. The Dolphins have been just so close to adding a number of different backs this offseason that it just doesn't seem like they want to feature Gaskin. And they don't have to. They did it for 1 season for a few games. It doesn't mean they're going to this year. And given, again, that he's not a super talented running back, he's going to need that high volume, going to need to be featured. If he doesn't, it's going to hurt. And realistically, not even talking about these other backs I'm drafting right now, that opportunity cost is just too high. There are incredible quarterbacks going in the 5th round. There are incredible wide receivers going in the 5th round. I'm pretty unlikely to take a chance on Gaskin in that range, so I'm probably not drafting Gaskin right now. But again, that risk goes down every week as we move towards late August, and I will be ranking him higher if we get to that point, and he's the guy. Between Hunt and Chase, I do think their average outcome is fairly similar. Hunt has a slight edge in expected touchdowns. They kind of have a similar ceiling because, Chubb's going to take a ton of touchdowns too, but I would say a slight edge for Hunt in expected touchdowns, with Edmonds winning by a good chunk in expected receptions. Maybe you could say Chase has a higher floor, but for me, they're very, very similar. So it's going to come down to ceiling. Who has the better ceiling if everything works out in their favor, at least within reason, right? Not if they get unbelievably lucky, if their best path comes true. If Chubb gets hurt and if Connor gets hurt, who has more upside between these 2? I believe the answer to that is Chase Edmonds. He is on the better offense, and if Connor gets hurt, which is probably more likely than not, then Edmonds would almost certainly become the feature back and would be a clear running back one because we know the receptions will be there with him. With Hunt, we went over how we've seen this happen. Chubb went down last season. The receptions still stayed around 2, which is significantly less than Edmonds is expected to get, even with Connor healthy. So since I believe Edmonds has that higher ceiling, and I believe their average outcome is pretty much the same, and honestly, there's a better chance that Edmonds hits that ceiling, I pretty much have to rank Chase Edmonds over Kareem Hunt, and I am ranking both of them ahead of Gaskin for now. Again, Gaskin will slowly move over them into mid-August if these backfields are the same. So that'll do it for this breakdown. I will probably be doing Dobbins versus Carson versus Montgomery next week, but if you have any other suggestions, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you want to see my updated take on every single player, you can always check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? But thanks for watching.